Modest Buzelis was once one of the favorites to be the #1 pick, and while that may not be the case after an up and down season with the Ignite, he still managed to show his upside and that he can affect the game in a few ways, though in a bit of a different role than was once projected. Measuring right at 6'9", 200 without shoes, Modest made an impact as an off-ball wing or forward who can make plays in spurts and has some connective abilities, but really stood out in his help defense and effectiveness on that end of the floor. Now he will need to continue making significant progress physically and as a shooter, but he's someone that has the tools to make a legitimate impact and should find a lot of teams with interest inside the lottery. Now coming into the year, I wouldn't have guessed that we would start with defense and talking about Modest's game, but his play and help or off the ball was the most immediately impactful piece of what he did, and a spot I think he can be a real positive in the NBA. He has good positional size, and though he has basically an even wingspan, 6'10" with an 8'10" standing reach is at least enough to make his presence felt in a lot of situations. His positioning and feel for rotations was consistently good, and what popped most was his help side or secondary rim protection, where he frequently blocked and changed shots, averaging nearly 2 a game and setting the record for most blocks in a season for the program. His combination of feel to see plays developing, his timing and ability to elevate quickly made him a real presence in a way that I didn't expect, even though he had some flashes of it in the past. Now elsewhere in help, he showed good feel for a number of things. He of course operated a ton as the low man off of a pick and roll and came up with some blocks and deflections there. He was solid covering ground and closing out. He was aware on X outs and help to helper situations and came up with a handful of steals and passing lanes too, though that wasn't his primary source of impact. Now through all this, he still had his share of moments chasing blocks and getting out of position or ball watching, which is to be expected in making this adjustment, but it was hardly an issue in the way that we've seen from others, and I think that's positive, and all that stuff should work itself out naturally as he gets acclimated to the league.
On the drive, kick out to Reed, extra pass.
Martin, he's a two-way player out of UConn. There's Buzelis.
Yeah, you dig, and it ends up being quite the story. Oh, Harkless, Scotty Lewis, Alex Reese, Demoy Hodge, and Ashton Higgins.
Buzelis, another steal. Buzelis gets the steal, and he wants to push the pace forward. Knight. Buzelis, he can handle it. Throws it up off the rim.
Fade away, no. Rebound comes down to
Herb Bowden, who misses that one.
in the corner. Lucas Yunas for 3. No. Chase down.
I found Modest's on-ball defense to be a bit more of a mixed bag, which I'll detail later on, but he's a capable mover at his size who uses his length really well in space, often staying vertical and elevating quickly, and as a result he came up with a lot of blocks and deflections in the process. He competed on the majority of his possessions, the effort was usually there in recovery, and he avoided being a consistent sore spot in the defense, and I think that means something. Now, he's probably not going to be a shutdown wing or someone that's bothering people with ball pressure at the point of attack, but someone who can contain, recover, use his length, and switch is always going to provide value. I wouldn't say that he has the highest ceiling on this end just given his physical attributes, but if he makes a concerted effort, I believe he has all the pieces to be a difference maker in multiple ways, and at his size, teams are always looking to add that.
Ball handling and his post-up situations.
Stanley Johnson on the penetration. Get down! And now we're going to see players continue to just get better and better. Jang, that's blocked by Buzelis. Here's John Pinder.
Sends the ball instead goes to Miller. Isaiah Miller. He's been great all night. No.
And he's going to trust him to do the same with him.
Here's Manaya. And Buzelis gets the block.
Largest lead for either side has been just 9. Higgins tried to find.
Harrison swatted away by confidence you talked about earlier, now getting his second start in a row. Good block.
Now offensively, he currently fits in best as more of an off-ball threat, and I would imagine that will be the case in the future in more of a play finishing or a complementary role than one of a major creator. He's a pretty solid cutter who had real success here despite having less than stellar playmakers around him, and he was able to find open spaces and see things before they happened in order to convert. Whether it was him coming out of the corner, reading his defender with their back turned, or seeing his low man occupied with a short roll, he was consistently on time and both improvised and executed design designed actions well. His size and ability to elevate as a finisher add to his effectiveness here, of course, as he's able to finish lobs and get to heights quicker than others, but it also helped him in being effective on the offensive glass, finishing putbacks, and while he wasn't particularly efficient in the open floor, he was at least capable of making things happen there in transition as well.
Players, and so there's a lot of different hats that are worn.
Sean Marks in the house.
Gilder the lob for Buzelis.
Ignite with numbers, a 4-on-2 break. Buzelis throws it down. Tracking it down. Ahead of the pack in Buzelis.
Sports and outside of traditional sports draft design, that way we can stand out.
Jumper from Smith, short. Oh, and look.
The hustle come in at the even 500, 7 and 7.
And get better three-point shooting.
There's Buzelis.
Darlin taking it himself all the way to the rim, no good. Tipped up and in though.
Now there are still big questions in his ability to create, but I did like some of the moments he had attacking shifted defenses and using his body to get to the rim or to a dribble pull-up, and I think his upside could be worth exploring in these areas. He shot 47% on off the dribble twos, which is a really good mark, though he only had 38 attempts, and he loved getting to the Dirk fade. He uses size well on bumps and mismatches and has the potential to operate from the high post. So again, his most ideal usage will likely come from being more of a spot-up guy in off-ball threat, but he at least has the potential to make people pay on limited dribble situations and possible mismatches on the interior.
Buzelis wants to step back on Omi.
RMX on there. So I think we use a lot of old visual tricks to pay homage to the original and at the same time.
Cut down to 9. Buzelis trying to set up his man. Oh, man down, man down.
Game and a half out of a playoff spot, so long way to go, and also trying to get some momentum going as they're getting held
On the floor. It takes a lot of courage to do this.
It really does.
Forward in the post, shot clock winding down. Buzelis has to get it up. One dribble, pull-up jumper.
There's Buzelis. The shot over Singleton.
Oh, behind the back. Buzelis showing the handle. He's looking for the winner. Gets it back. Buzelis, 2 seconds for the win. Backdoor cut. There's Buzelis going one-on-one against BCA.
Buzelis takes Johnson baseline. Fall away is good.
Keep their dream and staying in touch, like Marjan said. You know, Marjan has been in the NBA for a couple years now, and more talent than they would play with and against.
Buzelis against McGriff. Got it.
This season tournament, coming to G League games, basically anything I can find to do.
And getting into the improvement areas, Modest is another player with shooting as one of his biggest swing skills. He shot just 26% from 3 on 3 attempts and around 29% on catch and shoot looks, and the adjustment from the high school to the NBA line along with the speed of the game was a significant one for him. But to me, he is pretty textbook mechanically at his core. He's very square to the rim, his release point is high, keeps the ball away from his body. There's not a lot going on in his guide hand or his hand placement, but there seemed to be an issue for him in shooting from deeper range, and it led to short misses and many inconsistencies. We've seen high release point and limited dip shooters struggle with this, and his might have been as drastic as I've seen in the last few years. Now for Modest to have the easiest time contributing offensively, being a threat as a shooter will be crucial. He shot over 40% his senior year at Sunrise, and that's where we first saw some of his mechanical tweaks, so I do value that sample quite a bit, but prior to that he was fairly inconsistent from 3 and we just haven't seen it at this level. I would expect that once he gets stronger he'll shoot an easier ball and should be respectable eventually, and at the end of the day I don't think he's ever going to be labeled a non-shooter, but those higher end outcomes that were anticipated might be more of a work in progress given some of the things that we mentioned.
Lineup, and he's done a good job defensively.
more from a night a season ago. Buzelis, this is what he does.
There's a lot of different pieces and improvement areas that we'll touch on within this, but I have some concerns in his ability to create advantages as a playmaker and generally in his strength and dexterity when handling the ball. He's not the quickest, his handle lacked against pressure, he's fairly upright in a lot of situations, and with his lack of strength on drives, it led to a lot of contested shots, turnovers, and low flow possessions where options became limited after he was forced to pick up the ball. There were a lot of moments where he was unable to turn that corner and would default to the turnaround, which he is capable of making, but it's a shot that a lot of teams aren't necessarily in love with. And then that matched with some of his tendency to float through games, which wasn't completely his fault, did leave me and others with a lot of questions.
Buzelis backing in Gates, leaves it short.
You know, he really has. And one of the things offensively for this Ignite team, and when I talk to the coaches, they said
Buzelis working against Jang. A lot of contact, no whistle. Court player development. He will be the acting head coach tonight for Ignite because this was his scout against the Lakers.
Now positively, he could still string together some moves and had moments of getting lower and smoother on drives that I thought were really impressive and shouldn't go unnoticed. And if he does get stronger, maybe add 15 to 20 pounds, things like his usage of the shoulder bump and spin are going to become worlds easier for him, even as he already found a way to make it work at times. But to keep it simple, he's just far from a finished product right now, and in an attempt to project the role that he plays at the next level, I just find it harder to bank on his creation being substantial and think whatever he does with the ball will be more of a product of where his shooting gravity is at and the type of situations his teammates and coaches can put him in.
Buzelis. Buzelis takes a look at the shot clock. It's down to 6. A step back 3. So Buzelis now with the clear out. Crossover. Oh!
And then related to his self-creation, his playmaking for others and overall processing speed left a little more to be desired as well. There were too many moments where he'd miss simple reads and open teammates, especially off the live dribble, and even for someone that should most naturally slide into more of a team playmaking or connective role, it's a necessity to make the right play more consistently than he did and avoid making those safe plays that, though weren't turnovers or necessarily negative on paper, still impacted the game and at times felt like attempts just to get the ball out of his hands. I do still think that he can be a solid ball mover who is able to see over the defense at his size. He made a handful of standout plays in transition, some intriguing skill and touch passes and moments in the pick and roll, and has some solid connective qualities overall. But again, to create for a team in a positive manner, he'll have to take significant steps forward as a ball handler and in his decision making off the live dribble in a way that wasn't there as much as I would have liked to see this year.
Top stadium in the league, and the atmosphere out here is.
Let's just say defense is his strong suit. We're going to go there.
With Baji out of position.
To 69. Buzelis to the base.
Buzelis. Extra pass, Cole from the corner. Holland, catch and shoot.
We're in a scramble. Buzelis up top, drop.
Finally finishing it up with that other part of his defense, my biggest worry here is one, in his strength to absorb contact, but secondly in his ability to flip his hips quickly and contain more effective creators. He had more than his share of good moments as we showed before, but there were also advantages given up with him being late to adjust to the cross step or fully commit to recovery, and once many wing size players or bigger guards could get a step and get it into his body, it was tougher for him to bother the shot even if he maintained the effort to get back into the play. And in the post, some players were just able to walk him right to the rim. It doesn't take away from the good things that he did on this end of the floor, but this is where most of his problems came.
He's very likely going to be drafted in the top 10, if not top 3.
Bryce Hamilton going to work. 2 seconds, gets to his left. And Ramsey. And 1. He has
I see Modest fitting in best as a combo forward who serves as an off-ball threat, a solid floor spacer, and can get into gaps as a playmaker off of his teammates, and then defensively being able to guard a couple positions and provide some secondary rim protection would make for a valuable piece in time. The level he reaches will be heavily decided by his outside shot and then the strength aspect, but I think at his best he could get to the high level starter range to maybe a bit more if everything shakes out in his favor. He'll likely land anywhere from the top 5 into the late lottery, and fit wise I like Portland. They'd probably be the most patient with him too, and then Detroit and Charlotte, and on the back end Utah and Chicago intrigue me too. My number one answer to a comparison for Modest is there isn't a very good one, but I think a version of Jeremy Grant could be what he resembles in the league. Grant's profile as a combo forward, help side defender who has taken on a few roles offensively is plausible. Now, Grant has become a real scorer and he's a lot better athlete, but Modest is more gifted offensively than he was entering the league. So some version of him I could see him resembling. Modest Buzelis' combination of size, defensive tools, and the upside to complement in a few ways offensively make him someone worth considering in the lottery of this draft. Now he does have his share of things to improve upon in making progress physically and from 3 and as a decision maker, but I think he could be a real difference maker in the NBA, especially if he lands in the right situation.